Our next panel will be a tale of self-staking and decentralization, discussed by Julian, Stake Capital, Chris, Chainflow, Alan, SSV, and Eve, Bitcoin Swiss. Moderated by Mirko. Big applause, please.
Test? All right. Perfect. So this is a panel about decentralization. It's actually one of the most important topics, I think, and it's usually pretty underexplored. So I'm very grateful that we have great minds from the industry here to discuss decentralization as it's one of the key values of what brings the crypto industry together, and staking is a huge facilitator of decentralization through all the validation and governance and everything. So I suggest we just do a quick round of introductions. Chris, if you want to start, just a very brief intro.
Sure. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm the founder of Chainflow. We're a small, independent, and bootstrapped validator operator on about 15 chains right now.
I'm Alan. I'm leading a project called SSV Network. We're the first implementation for DVT, which is a distributed validator technology layer.
My name is John Butulu. I'm the founder of Stake Capital Group, where we invest in a space as a family office. We also run a quant, so all type of quantitative arbitrage type of things. Also build projects such as Rect News, the underlying investigative firm for exploits, and also we do videos and type of music. We have also Blackpool, the leader in the NFT market, as a hedge fund. We control, for example, manage Sorare, Immortal type of games. StakeDAO, it's asset management. We have 300 million US dollars. And yeah, so we also studios. We build a lot of different companies, and we invest, and we also do stuff on the market. So for us, staking is a huge part of the business on the quant side.
So I'm Yves Hohenstein. I'm head of staking at Bitcoin Swiss. We're a Swiss broker, custodian, and staking provider, focusing mainly on institutional clients.
Great, thank you. So this morning we actually talked about bringing staking to 1 billion users. Exchange staking is going to be a big part of that, because not everyone is ending up running their own validators. I have a question for you, Julian, as an early validator and innovator in the whole DeFi space. How do you see the risk of stake centralization from exchanges around the world?
It's a good question. Well, the concept of accumulating governance power or tokens in this case, and being able to validate the chain, it's obviously against the concept of decentralization, in the sense that normally anyone should be able to validate, and anyone should be able to be part of the system to provide value back to the network. I believe this is part of the technology that for now there's none of those blockchain that can be fully decentralized, because on the protocol level this is not possible. So in order to have fully decentralized network, you will need to achieve algorithm or stuff, the mechanism of keeping the chain safe to run on all the different devices, and more importantly, for example, on smartphones. So anyone could be part without setting up huge infrastructure. So until we get there, the importance of centralized exchanges and, for example, other providers that are doing some consortium to accumulate governance power, such as Lido, I think it's quite interesting in the sense of the nascent space. And we have to make sure that those people, their goal is they exist as a business because they run and they provide services. What we have to ensure is that they don't get enforced to do certain action that are against the community and the blockchain. I think that's the most important aspect. But in normal life, centralized authority, they can act very nicely as long as their interest is aligned with the future or the vision of the technology they're trying to support. So this is what we have to do as a community, make sure it's aligned interest.
Yeah, that's great. And maybe then a question for you is from like Bitcoin Swiss, one of the largest custodial staking providers. Like, how do you see your role in the industry, like providing staking services?
Well, I would say next to the whole requirements on a technical level, there's also a lot of knowledge still required to participate in staking, which is not yet appealing to a large portion of people who would like to participate in staking. And one of our roles is to support them. So we are an intermediary, we're a financial services company, and we take over the whole process for them. So we give them a peace of mind. They don't have to deal with self-custody. They don't have to deal with staking transactions. But that comes at a price where we then cover a certain fee for that.
Yeah, that's great. And like, Julian, how do you actually see like the whole liquid staking and MEV space? Do you think that is like more like an opportunity for decentralization, or it's more of a risk for decentralization moving forward with the innovations around liquid staking?
Yeah, I think like liquid staking is an interesting concept, and I was one of the first one to come up. I actually created the concept of liquid staking in a white paper that was published in before the Lido project, for example, and then work with Constantine and all these different things. But liquid staking it's a layer of abstraction to something that should be able to give everyone the opportunity to directly control their asset if the asset is liquid on the market. But at the end of the day, if you have only one provider of liquid staking, then you end up with the same problem. Because if the liquid staking operator or the smart contract, they are, like what happened to Tornado Cash, for example, they are enforced to do certain things because they cannot prove the KYC or AML or whatever, the money flow, then you become as unsafe as if you were using a centralized authority, like for example, not saying this is unsafe, but like more centralized funds. So liquid staking is a huge opportunity as long as we make sure as a community that we want to get into decentralization and not necessarily accumulate the biggest asset under management, because then it brings risk to the ecosystem. So we need more liquid staking, such as the brilliant and amazing project Lido. We need many of them, and they need to potentially collaborate between each other, but be in different direction and location in the world to make sure that we are stable and safe as a community. And then on the concept of validators doing liquid staking or participating in liquid staking, this is something that we've done. We were one of the first ones to do in Stake Capital. It's not to just do validations as a service, but use validation for the different operations that we are doing in the quant side, for example. Arbitrage, market makers, liquidations, all these type of things that require a percentage of validations. And if you have liquid staking, then it can help you. So I think for now we believe staking is about capturing value from the validation, so capturing a percentage of the inflation of the protocol as if you were the Fed, but actually you have an amount of different services and extraction of value you can get, some MEV and also different lobby and marketing or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think the whole space is getting more modularized. Like there's the liquid staking, the MEV and everything, and there are a lot of innovations happening in general. So Yves, like from your side, like what do you think is the biggest challenge for decentralization in general?
I would say again, one thing is the knowledge topic. So that's still too difficult for many people. Then, as you said, Julian, before, you may, if you look at Solana, for example, you may need significant investment in hardware, and I think We have to get somewhere where we can have it all on our phones, etc., to really get distributed. But then there's also like financial limitations. If you look at Ethereum, for example, 32 ETH is not little money for the majority of the world. And that all together basically are impediments to really try to get into that new field. And then the next thing is you have to look at the whole value chain. So as you just said, what does it help me if I have 100,000 validators, but then I have 5, 6 relays for MEV that control everything? So we have to look at the whole chain as well.
Yeah, certainly. And Chris, like from your perspective, you're like a self-funded validator and like a big decentralization advocate, like doing a lot of education in the space as well. Like, how do you see these things, and how is it actually possible to track decentralization? Something that Yves just mentioned, like there are like many nuances to decentralization, right?
Yeah, I think quickly to touch on what Julian said, it's difficult to attract stake if you only provide core validator services. So for smaller individual operators, the challenge is how to differentiate our services in, say, a very competitive pool. Doing it by fees doesn't really work. Usually what happens, somebody that's looking to stake will go to a block explorer, they'll look at the top, maybe 5 to 10 validators listed by stake, look for the lowest fee, and pile their stake onto one of the validators that already has a lot of stake. So one of the challenges is to figure out how to break that process that delegators use in order to get them thinking more consciously about who to stake to and how. To briefly touch on MEV, I think the democratization of MEV tools, like Skip, for example, is doing and Jito Labs is doing, will go a long way in helping level the playing field when it comes to offering MEV revenue share for validators to delegators. So I think that's a positive advancement. And then to your question about how to track decentralization, I typically think about it in 2 ways or 2 different layers. I think about it at the capital layer, and I think about it at the infrastructure layer. At the capital level, we typically look to a number like the Nakamoto coefficient that is a simple measure of the number of validators that control 33% of stake on the network. And then at the infrastructure layer, things can get a little bit more complex because you're looking at the entities that are running the hardware, you're looking at the entities that are owning the hardware, and then you can even get into things like geographic location, where do the servers stay, who owns the data centers where the servers are. So there are a number of layers that you can look at decentralization. I would say that the 2 main layers, though, would be the capital layer and the infrastructure layer.
Yeah, so that's, there's a very wide range of how you can run a validator and how you start validating, what's your setup. Alon, from your perspective, how can we incentivize more people to run their own nodes with a diverse set as well, some bare metal, some in the cloud, and how do we get to that diverse validator set?
So I definitely focused on me personally, on the infrastructural hardware level. I think that's, especially in Ethereum, it's very important because ultimately somebody else can actually earn the money, but the validator key is the one that making the votes. And I think that it's not just about home stakers, but in general, how do you increase the amount of independent operators that work in the ecosystem, right? And I think that we are starting to see interesting protocols enabling smaller operators, home stakers, to plug in themselves into this liquid staking type of deal. And that's really important because that's probably the biggest barrier or the biggest disincentive for them to actually do that, because you're not only required to run 32 ETH validators, you're not liquid like everyone else. And so plugging into that is really important, stuff like Stakewise V3 and Rocket Pool and so on and so forth. And so I think that really creates a lot of interesting ways of doing that. I think it's, by the way, it's very parallel to what happened with DeFi, where the DeFi movement began where individuals, which later on became whales, but individuals being able to put liquidity in, gain something from the system, and that creates a whole new industry. And so I think that's interesting there. I definitely think we need to think about who is controlling the validator key, especially in Ethereum. and having a diverse set of those independent operators.
Julian, from your side, like how do you see like this space as we grow into like running more individual validators from like individuals around the world, and we see that in DeFi as well, like many projects get exploited or like there are hacks or something like this. Is there a risk for like going more towards the way of like everyone is running a node on their smartphone kind of, or like going the very decentralized route of staking?
Well, normally, if we achieve fully workable decentralization, normally anyone should be able to run a node. And the node is not, it's not because you go down for a couple of hours or 20 hours or 24 hours that you get slashed. In a theory, a fully decentralized network will require a sufficient amount of nodes that can actually go and disappear from the validation set. So the vision of having phones and you can turn off your phone when you go to bed, when you go to sleep, or in a plane, stuff like that should be possible, and the network should be able to support those type of behaviors on the network. So unless we are capable on the game theory, mathematically speaking, algorithmic way to have those things work together, then it will be impossible for normal users to run validators, and it will be really risky. For example, I've seen a lot online people advocating for dApp node to run Ethereum validations. I mean, dApp node is fantastic, and it's part of the way of providing and having access to the blockchain. I think we should all do type of dApp node, but in a sense, telling people that they should run the dApp node at home for validating, meaning also earning and making validation, it's kind of very dangerous and it's really costly. You need to have your own access to internet. If internet shut down, then 5G, 4G, you need to have your own backup on electricity. You need to have like all like security at home. This is kind of a business. It's not like, not everyone can run their own Uber infrastructure, but everyone can buy, get a cab. So it's two different business. We need to be cautious. Running a dApp node for the spirit of freedom and having access to your own RPC, and actually running a dApp node just as an observer node, it's more important than running a validation as a dApp node, because you will, by order of magnitude, you will have way easier access to the RPC model than actually proving the validation set. So yeah, it's unless we have the technology ready for that, for individuals it's dangerous, and I will not recommend doing this. I will probably like just incentivize them to stake into liquid staking or in centralized authority like Bitcoin, because it's like the concept of saying not your key, not your money. But I mean, this works for 1% of the people in this world. 99% of people don't actually and shouldn't be doing not your key, not your money. They can use system in place, centralized authority, or like other type of services that will make sure that money is not stolen in one way or another. Because if we all have our key, our money, then there will be a lot of, this world will be way more dangerous. Yeah.
So do you think, Alan, like the DVT technology can be a solution to that? Like enabling many more people to run their own validators, making it much more easy?
Yeah, I think what happens is if you combine the application layer, stuff like Rocket Pool, Stakewise V3, and even now Lido with kind of their push towards permissionless operators joining their network, combine that with kind of an underlying infrastructure like DVT. I don't know if everyone knows what DVT is, but it's basically a protocol which enables you to take an Ethereum validator, split it up into independent operators, and then they together can work with a consensus protocol and threshold signature scheme to actually operate that validator. And so if you combine that with the applications like Lido, what they're pushing, Rocket Pool, Stakewise, and others, then you could definitely open it up to not just being able to run at-home operators or small-scale shops that run infrastructure, but also create the economical incentive behind it. There's enough money to go around, and I think it's crucial not just for the Ethereum ecosystem, but also the players in it. The more we increase the systemic risk on Ethereum with centralized staking, the more we all tend to lose. And so it is a game which we will lose eventually if we don't do something about it. And so in this case, I think it's, first of all, it's necessary, but it also, it's very plausible if we create the economical incentives. Right, if you run your own one validator at home, it might be not economical, but if you can have like a fairly modest setup, which doesn't have to be the best quality, but enough because it uses something like DVT, and you run 20, 30 validators, you might even make some returns on it. And that's enough to unlock more operators within the network.
So do you think, Eve, like from your side, this can actually be a good like counterpart, like DVT being kind of like a decentralized solution to like getting to 1 billion users in crypto, and exchange staking being more of like a centralized solution, like more of the convenient solution of getting to 1 billion users? Or like, how do you see these two sides of the coin?
I believe that DVT is really good at addressing one main of those obstacles, which is the whole operational risk of slashing, etc. I still believe it's not something for my mom as a target group. So I believe there will always be various groups of people. There's those people who want to have control, or they have an ideal behind something and the decentralization. Then are the others that are just, they don't want to touch anything they don't know, so they rather trust somebody, even though we talk about trustless systems, but in the end there are still many parties involved which either help with complexity or provide some additional trust of proper execution, maybe more than actually fraud. And then there's also those people who are just, let's call it lazy, or they go for maximum profit. So let's take the Lido example. With the increasing power that Lido has, they have more and more opportunities to extract MEV, even across blocks, etc. So there's a tendency that they will have even higher APR. And I assume there's a lot of people who don't really care about the centralization that comes with it, and just go where the highest APR is. And the same, you could have the same discussion about the whole flashbots topic, etc., and the censorship. So we have to create some incentives to not only rely on the belief in the good, because I think there's a large portion of people out there where 99%. This is there's not the primary motive exactly. Yeah.
I totally agree. I think that ultimately it's up to you guys to make the best technical decisions for your clients and use like the best go-to technology you can. I don't expect the end client to use something as sophisticated as DVT, but I do expect the developers in kind of those big exchanges to consider it and make sure that they choose right.
I do agree, and I mean that's a topic we're looking at DVT. Mainly for operational safety, etc.
What do you think, Chris, like are the biggest incentives for people to run their own nodes and run validators themselves?
Well, I think the biggest incentive to run your own node is the core concept of self-sovereignty. I think ultimately if, you're in this movement because decentralization brought you here and the concept of self-sovereignty brought you here too, I think running a node is a very strong expression of that value. So to me, starting at that base layer is where it would start for a lot of people. For other people, I think they may enjoy the technical challenge, which, is not easy, but it's not impossible either. So I think that other people enjoy the technical challenge. And then from there, I really think, again, if you're here to contribute to the core value of decentralization, which hopefully is the foundation that brought us all here, running your own node is an expression of supporting the network as an individual, and we need a lot of individuals running a lot of nodes to ensure these networks stay decentralized and ultimately stay censorship resistant.
So do you think the exchange staking...
One thing, like running your own node doesn't mean like you need to validate. That's really important. Because if you run your own node, and having access to your own RPC, it's super simple and it's not risky. and you're actually providing a lot of value to the network because you are propagating the transaction. You can serve RPC and all different things. So actually, it's more valuable to more valuable, but for the community to actually run a node without validating, for example, like through a DApp node, which is a fantastic piece of. They build everything for you. It's plug and play. Yeah.
I think that's the most important part, that you make it, if we want to get out of our 1% sophisticated, altruistic, idealistic people, we have to make it as simple as possible. So either download a validator app on your phone, or just use an app on your PC, or nowadays with the big cloud providers, they have finished node services that they offer just to make it easy to get this adoption.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it proves that there are like so many nuances to decentralization. Maybe as a closing thought, kind of, Chris, like, what do you think is the most decentralized blockchain to date, and why is that?
It's somewhat of a loaded question, but I'll give it a shot. I think the first thing I think about is absolute decentralization versus relative decentralization. I think generally in terms of absolute decentralization, we're all trying hard, but we still have quite a ways to go. And I think those of us who do care about this value of decentralization need to work really hard to ensure that as new entrants come in, we educate them and help them understand that that's the reason that we're all here. In terms of relative decentralization, just trying to speak as, I guess, objectively as possible. If you look at the Nakamoto coefficient of the networks we track on a website called nakaflow.io, when you look at Solana, you look at ThorChain, and you look at Avalanche, they're all up around in the 30s, which is the highest that we're seeing. If you're talking about number of nodes and client diversity, I'd probably put Ethereum up there. And then when you're looking at, I would say, community and just overall decentralization of the community and the process and how the ecosystem is growing, I would point to Cosmos.
Cool. That's great to hear. And I'm really enjoying that. I think it's a great and very important conversation to have.
We can have the view from our side, no? To this question.
I have a suggestion for another coefficient called the AWS coefficient, which is if you turn off the AWS, how many blockchains will crash?
Exactly.
What about Hetzner?
I think there's a
Hetzner killed us off anyway. So.
It's a good point. I think there's a difference between decentralization and censorship resistant. And none of the chain out there are decentralized. If you think about censorship resistant, the two major blockchains that you can consider better in terms of censorship resistant are Bitcoin and Ethereum. I don't think Cosmos, Avalanche, Solana are censorship resistant or decentralized, because as you mentioned, also like all those different nodes is a very closer, very controlled set of validators. But yeah, I think the two major blockchain are Bitcoin and Ethereum in terms of censorship resistant and so decentralization.
I also think that values like the Nakamoto coefficient, for example, they give you an indication. And there's, like you just mentioned, that website, there's others as well that try to create this transparency about some qualitative aspects of certain protocols. But then again, we must not be naive and believe that this is the full truth, because we do not know which addresses, for example, are controlled by the same entity behind it. And we do see that this often happens where large entities, whales, etc., control a whole number of addresses, nodes, etc. And that's the transparency we don't have actually across all the chains.
And that's a very good point, because if you, for example, you run validators, you guys are regulated, or you have a balance sheet, and you're accountable for giving the truth and transparency against authorities. So I will be more confident giving my money or staking to those guys than staking to an anon validator, where I don't really know where this staking is coming from and if this person is associated to someone that I'm against you. So this type of concept of anonymity as someone providing service is really different from anonymity as a value vision, as a protocol that we're all following. So, for example, I don't use applications that are run by Anon, because they are providing a service and they're supposed to manage my money. So I'm really not confident with that. I'm confident with a protocol being run as multiple different parties, but not as an add-on providing me a service, because at the end we don't know what it's capable of doing. Even if everything is on smart contract and the actions on smart contract has to be voted by the community, then it's a little bit safer. But otherwise, it's very dangerous. And we know on fake news, our best clients are unknown people. So yeah.
Yeah, and the one note I would add about the metrics, I agree, the metrics are a start of a story, but they're not the full story. Like, you can look at Solana, for example, and within their Nakamoto coefficient of 30, there are 15 anonymous validators. We don't know who's running those. So, but I do think they're really helpful in starting to tell a story and helping people understand the concepts that we're trying to get across. Because I think as the noise more and more builds around what's now called Web3, that we need to be able to tell these stories in a way that at least is starting to get across to a lot of these people that are entering today, so we can then explain to them why this is important. So I agree that these metrics are far from the holy grail of trying to figure this out, but I think they're a useful starting point to have the conversation like we're having here.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think we're all on the same page that like decentralization is a very important topic, but there are so many nuances to it, and there's many things to be explored, and like there are like a lot of technicalities that we have to aware of, and also like there needs to be a lot of education happening to people what decentralization actually means and how someone can contribute to decentralization, which doesn't necessarily mean to run your own validators. It can be something else as well. So yeah, we are running out of time, unfortunately, but if anyone has questions, I think everyone will still be around in the area. And yeah, feel free to hit everyone up here with your questions, and then we are moving over to the next talk. Yeah, thanks for being on the panel, everyone. I think that's a great discussion, very important to have. And yeah, please give a big round of applause for everyone.